Hey everyone, welcome to episode 6 of the Better Bidding series. In last week's episode, we talked about the two-level bids and just some of the conventions down here. So, two-level bids, just playing preempts with the exception of two clubs. With two clubs, just playing two diamonds is waiting. We talked about Kokish and the ability to invert like your responses in Kokish, where three clubs shows just hearts and three hearts shows hearts and clubs, and you can even do the same with spades and diamonds and flip those. With preempts, the advantage of Transfer McCabe, which gives you the ability to actually run out to a suit instead of having just purely a lead direct. We talked about what types of responses you can have over two no trump, and then we went into the other conventions box where we spoke about two-way new minor forcing and even XYZ, handling. Treating reverses, unusual over unusual, defense against strong club. And then we also spoke about transfers over a major double, which I probably should have spoke about when we were in the major box. If I didn't, I should have. But anyway, a good point for us to get into the second half of the card. And I think for today, we're going to focus on doubles and then just like this no trump. So the first half of this, and then we'll get into the next part and slam bidding and all that stuff. Moving right along. All right, so when it comes to the double section, I think obviously the most straightforward doubles that people probably have in their toolbox are I think the first three boxes here everybody probably has negative double. There's various ranges to how high you want to play a negative double. You'll see those people who have it up through infinity on the convention card, and I think there is a key principle that generally a first double in some auction, unless it's just clear cut otherwise, is probably takeout. But obviously if the auction goes one of something four spades, you have to take into account maybe you don't want to be proceeding past four spades, so it's obviously showing cards at that point. And you just want to be careful about how high to go necessarily in those cases. So I usually say four hearts or four spades. Yes, you could go all the way through that, but if they jump to the 5 level, am I really gonna necessarily find a bid? It's a little more difficult in that situation. So I usually do this. Responsive doubles. I usually play through 3 spades maybe. Although again, usually the auctions don't get that high. Maximal doubles. So maximal doubles, for those who are unfamiliar, this comes up in an auction where you and your partner have basically opened and raised a major, and then they interfere, and you have no room to basically kind of make some type of game try. So let's say your partner opens a heart, pass, you respond 2 hearts, they come in with 3 diamonds, and now your partner wants to make some type of game try. Well, how can they? 3 hearts is just usually purely competitive in these auctions. So you need to have the ability to distinguish between purely competitive and a more forward-going hand. And the way you do that is with double. And so that's what's called a maximal double in this situation. It's not penalty. It's not takeout. It's just saying, hey, I'm inviting in these situations. And it's only when they bid the suit directly under the suit in which you had opened. So likewise, if you and your partner had agreed on spades, 3 hearts over that, a double would be maximal. The only reason it's with the bid right under is because you have in-between steps otherwise. So, if you guys have opened hearts or spades and they bid clubs, you still have the ability to have wiggle room to make game tries. And so double in that situation should be more penalty-oriented, unless you've agreed on takeout. That's a judgment call, but usually I go head hunting at a certain point in those situations. You and your partner open and raise, and they're coming in at the 3 level. Time to make them pay for that mistake is usually the way I think about it, but that's not everybody's first approach when it comes to those situations. But regardless, when it's the suit directly under the suit you and your partner have bid, that should be a maximal double. And then support doubles. I know these aren't even technically alertable anymore, but I feel like just about everybody does play them, at least within the US, maybe not as much in Europe and other places. But usually the principle I have with this is it's up through 2 of a major, although usually it's 2 major minus 1, because generally in the auction, a club has a heart, 2 hearts is natural. It's usually never a different bid, so having a double in that situation be support doesn't really make any sense when obviously, it's basically probably 3, 4, 6, 0 or something like that. So, you can say 2 major, but obviously, the situational context is relevant there. And then in terms of the other doubles, the ones that you don't even see presented on the card, there's a few different possibilities, for what to, put in these spots. One that I think is definitely relevant is what I'd call Snapdragon. Well, I wouldn't call it, but a Snapdragon double. So a Snapdragon double comes in the auction, and it's a very specific auction. They open a suit, your partner overcalls a different suit, the responder bids some other suit, and then basically you're left with the fourth suit. So like a diamond, a heart, a spade, for example. Now, double in this situation should mean like exactly three things. You have tolerance for partner's overcall suit. Should usually be at least a doubleton. You have some number of points. Obviously, you're not going to do this on nothing. And you usually have exactly 4 cards in the other suit. It could be, it could be even like a bad 5, for example. Like you may just not want to bid the 5-card suit yourself, but it is showing basically that other suit. That way, your partner, if they only had 5, if they only had like 5 of their overcall, may just convert and play in the suit that you've implied instead. So it's a way to show the other suit, tolerance for your partner's suit, and some number of points. So I think that is vital. I mean, obviously, double in that situation doesn't really have a lot of meaning to be anything else, so might as well give it that specific meaning in this case. Now, of course, finding hands that fit all 3 molds is fitting all 3 criteria is a little challenging. One of my partners and I, back in the day, we'd always say we had like a 2/3 or something when it came to Snapdragon, because we'd always find a way to lie on one of the conditions, usually about having tolerance for partner's suit. But I would say that's not the way to go about it, and you usually should try to find those situations where you could actually apply it, because they do come up. So I'd say Snapdragon here, which is exactly that situation. Another type of double that comes up, and I've played before, but I don't play, all the time, is ELC, equal level conversion. This comes up in the situation where they open like a major, for example, and you have the other major and diamonds. And so, what you're stuck with generally is if you have like just a minimal hand, you have to overcall at the 2 level, and then you never are able to get that other suit in. Or you don't even get the other suit in at all, because maybe you didn't overcall to begin with. So give me a hand like Ace, King, 4th of spades, a doubleton heart, Ace, Jack, 10, 5th of diamonds, and 2 low clubs, and they open a heart. I get to overcall 2 diamonds on this? Maybe. I mean, some people don't necessarily want to overcall 5-card suits at the 2 level unless the situation is right, if it's a really good suit, or if you just have that many values. And this is really on the cusp. What some people might play in that situation instead is to double. And classically, you're like, oh, I can't double with this hand. I don't have clubs. What do I do if partner bids 2 clubs? Well, if you're not playing ELC, converting the 2 diamonds in this situation would show a strong hand. But if you're playing ELC, it actually shows exactly this, which is, just, a minimal hand which had, at least 5 of this suit and 4 of the other major. So it does show a specific hand. Obviously, if you have that strong hand, you have to do something else. You either have to cube it or jump or something. But, the ability to actually show that type of hand is valuable because, you're not always able to capture that in just overcalling itself. So there is mileage in playing that. Just throwing it out there. I don't play it all the time, but I don't have a grievance with it either. It definitely has its use cases. And I think that's really covering the double box as a whole. So just to go through this again: negative doubles, responsive, maximal in the situation where you and your partner have opened and raised a major and they compete. Support doubles and Snapdragon, I think, are valuable ones. And then in general, when it just comes to kind of like doubling principles, I think always the way to think about it is, there's various situations which penalty does arise, like maybe they make a 2-suited bid, or, they overcall a no trump, and doubles should absolutely be penalty. But as a rule of thumb, most doubles, first doubles at least, are usually takeout. So, I like looking for blood as much as the other people, but, you don't always have the ability to do that in every auction. You just have to maybe hope your partner does it, and you can convert in those situations instead of you being able to do it yourself. All right, let's go on to, I guess we'll go down to overcalls, and then we'll just cross back to here, and that will be what we have for this week's episode. So in terms of overcalls, not anything super crazy here. So in terms of overcall range at the 1 level, I'm going to say something like 7 to like 17. I'm going to say good 7 to like bad 17, because I think otherwise you might want to make a power double. And I'm not a huge fan of overcalling super light. I think especially red, you need to be able to have a half decent overcall because you never know when a trap pass is coming, or you just find you find yourself in a bad situation because your partner trusts your overcall and you end up too high. So you definitely want to take that with a grain of salt. And some people might even have a stricter range here. They might even say 8, good 7, obviously king, jack, 10, something, and a side king, favorable. I don't think that's necessarily a crazy overcall in those situations, but you do want to be careful about it. There are times for 4-card overcalls. It's certainly not often, though, so I'm not going to check that box, and I don't play a light style when it comes to that. In terms of responses and follow-ups, they don't give you a lot of room on the convention card for this. What I've played with some people before, and this is relatively newer for me because I hadn't really played this before. Like before, I had almost always just by default checked off the non-forcing constructive box when partner bids a new suit. Meaning, I am going to try to usually find a way to raise, but if I made a dead minimum overcall, I might just pass. There are some people who think that bidding over overcalls should be forcing, which I think is more of a reason that overcalls need to have some type of value assigned to them instead of just having these super light ones. So what I've heard is sometimes 1 over 1 is forcing. So, let's say they open a club, you overcall a heart, and now your partner bids a spade. There are people who play that as forcing in these situations. And so you're forced to respond no matter what. And same thing would go for 2 over 2. So maybe they open 2 diamonds, or is it 2 over 2? Oh, no. Okay, so I got it now. A heart, 2 clubs by you, and now your partner bids 2 diamonds or 2 spades. There's people who would play that forcing as well. The one situation that people are on the fence about when it comes to forcing is 2 over 1, which is weird because, of course, 2 over 1 is game forcing in opening situations. But maybe a diamond, a heart, 2 clubs. That one may not necessarily be forcing. That might just be non-forcing constructive. So I've heard that thrown around before. There's some people who might just play all of those as forcing. Or you just play all of them as non-forcing constructive. I think at the end of the day, obviously, a new suit is going to have something to show for it. And so you should find a way to support that unless you just think you're at the bottom of your bid. Of course, if you are playing non-forcing constructive, you have to be able to have a way to force, whether that's through jumping or by just going through Q-bidding as default. But I'm not a huge fan of Q-bidding by default because I am a big believer that Q-bid should show support, as often as possible. So I'll go with this, but, I will say and preface this with there are people who play this as forcing in certain situations. In terms of jump raises, usually with jump raises, I play this as weak, and that's because you have the ability to generally make a mixed raise otherwise. So, a club by the opponents and you overcall a heart, your partner can jump to 3 clubs as a mixed raise. Therefore, jumping to 3 hearts should be weak. And of course, you want to make that maybe a wide-ranging weak. Obviously, you don't want to be crazy about it, vulnerable. But, if you have the ability to make a normal raise and a mixed raise, just think of what's under that, and then that's usually what jumping to 3 in that situation would look like. And then in terms of other follow-ups to overcalls, we're going to carry forward a principle that we had with the major suit openings, and we're going to play transfers in a similar situation. So I'll put that here. So transfers after 1x, 1m, and then they make what's usually a negative double. So similar principle here in terms of follow-ups here. So transfer starting at a no trump. So you lose the ability to play a no trump, which again on these types of auctions you're not losing out too much on. So starting at 1 no trump you play transfers. So 1 no would be clubs, and then the thing to think 1 no is clubs in context. We'll talk about that in a second. The reason I say that is because you have the ability to show different types of raises, kind of like what we were talking about last week. So to give a review of what we were talking about before, transfers after a major double, the idea we were saying about there is you have the ability to really differentiate your raises there, because what you can do is you can bid 2 major directly with a weak hand, and then you can bid 1 under your suit at the 2 level, so like a heart double 2 diamonds as a more constructive raise. So you have the ability to give a constructive raise, you have the ability to give a trashy raise, life is good. Now, similar principle applies with the overcall, but the overcall gives you an extra step, and that extra step is very vital in these situations. So the principle here is that there's 3 different types of raises you can make. If you transfer into the Q-bids into their suit, it's your limit raise. So, a club, a heart, double, a no trump, transfer to clubs. That is your limit raise in hearts. And then one under is still your constructive raise, and bidding the suit directly is your weak raise. Of course, you can actually flip those around. There's people who play different variations of that, but I think the ability to make 3 different types of raises there is really useful in order to get a good grasp on what the hand actually looks like. And then the rest of the transfers apply from there. One thing in general that I guess I didn't talk about last week when it came to the transfers, but this is also just kind of like a general principle when it comes to like one major and then some type of overcall auctions. This is something that I think has grown on me a lot more in recent years compared to when I first did this series, is I usually play 2 no trump in those situations as like just never natural and some type of artificial raise. Usually 4 or more. Same type of thing as actually it would show, with an opening, because now we play the opening Jacoby as Invitational Plus. Same thing with overcalls and doubles and all sorts of things. So, a heart double, 2 no trump is Jordan, so that's 4 or more hearts with limit raise. Same thing if it goes like a heart and they overcall a spade. And same thing in this auction where they open, your partner overcalls, they double, 2 no trump, still, a 4+ limit raise. So just in general, 2 no trump is rarely natural in those auctions. And this is specifically for a major. I think for a minor, it obviously has a lot more weight to be natural in those situations because you want to be in no trump a lot more. So yeah, you lose the ability to really show like a natural invitational no trump hand in those situations, but you are better able to show what type of raises you have, which has very, very powerful meaning to your partner in terms of interpreting what their hand should actually be doing afterwards. All right, overcall, steaming on right ahead. So we're going to go into the no trump section here. So for no trumps, overcall, I think this is relatively straightforward. We're going to play 15 to 18. System's on, just similar stuff as opposed to opening. Usually we give this an extra little point here, just to be able to not have to be forced to double with these hands and bid to a higher level. So, again, partner's probably not going to invite with 7 points, especially not with a bad 7. But there is the possibility that they'll catch you with an 18 count in these situations, and that's life at the end of the day. The balancing no trump, though, is an interesting one. Your classical bridge text will probably say like 11 to 14 in these situations. But I'm not a big fan of having to double and bid with like 15 or 16 counts. And there's some people who will play balancing range as anything from 11 to 16. You also find people who play this as like 11 to 16 for the majors and then maybe play like 11 to 14 for the minors. That one makes a little more sense because at least with the majors you have less room to advance a double to 1 no trump. Whereas, here, because your partner may be bidding at the 2 level, that is. Whereas after like a minor check balancing double, now your partner bids at the 1 level and you can bid 1 no trump to show that hand. So there's kind of a reason to differentiate that. But you could also play like 11 to 16 for everything. Now you might be asking, that's a really wide range. How do I know what my partner has in terms of figuring out where we belong? And the answer to that is playing a convention called range statement. So range statement is basically just like regular statement, but you have the ability to better show what type of point count you have along with your statement response. So the idea with range statement is this. So if you're at the bottom of your bid, which if you're playing 11 to 16 is usually like 11 to 13, you use your 2-level statement responses as just what that was, and then I'm at the bottom of my bid. So let's say it goes a diamond, pass, and balancing no trump, pass 2 clubs, 2 diamonds through 2 spades are 11 to 13 in our normal statement response. If you have a bigger hand, you start by responding to no trump. So with any 14 to 16, you just bid 2 no trump, and now partner can re-ask with 3 clubs. So partner bids 3 clubs in these situations to ask again, and then you make your normal response at the 3 level, which is still what statement was, but now you show that bigger hand. So that's how you are able to figure out where you belong, if you belong in game, if you should be signing off. It's the ability to differentiate between the weaker and the stronger balancing no trumps if you're going to play that wide a range. So if you have that in your toolbox, I think you're fine. So I'm going to go with 11 to 16. I'm going to mention range statement. I think that is a powerful convention to have in these situations. And I also typically do play systems on with balancing no trumps. I know they don't really have a good place to check this off, but I usually do. I know there's some people who don't, but I just play the same stuff at the end of the day and it hasn't backfired on me too badly. And then jump to 2 no trump. There are people who just play this strictly as minors, but at the end of the day, I usually just go with 2 lows, especially when 1 diamond promises usually 4 in most situations, 99% of the time. All right, defense versus no trump. Well, it's really hard to throw out, a defense here that I think should go on this card because there's a lot of different possibilities, and I've played a lot of different ones over the years too. When I was actually recording the first series, like the one I was primarily playing with some of my partners was Meckwell. And for those who are unfamiliar with Meckwell, so Meckwell defense against no trump is double is a minor or both majors. 2 clubs is clubs in a major, 2 diamonds is diamonds in a major, and hearts and spades are natural. So you cover a variety of hands, but one that I like, and one reason I like this is I like playing multi-landy, also called Hamilton, I think, in some places, but multi-landy is generally the one that's out there. The reason it's called that is because you combine the concept of multi with landy, and landy, or ladney as we sometimes call it within Discord, is 2 clubs as majors after a 1 no trump opening. So the reason I like this is, and this is one reason I like this as preferred to other defenses against no trump, is when you play those other defenses against no trump, usually the general rule of thumb is that you're 5-4 and the 2 suits that you're showing. But unless you and your partner have a strict agreement on it, there's never a clear-cut way to show, hey, I'm 5-4 this way, or I'm 5-4 the other way. And sometimes you're in a tough spot where you end up just playing your wrong fit, because maybe partner takes a preference into the wrong situation. And multi-landy differentiates that because it's pretty clear what your anchor suit in these situations are. In some of the 2 suit situations, not all of them. So multi-landy at its core, and we're going to talk about why I say at its core because I'm going to throw out another option actually. But what it is 2 clubs is majors, usually 5-4, and you can flip these either way. The reason you can flip these is because after your 2 club response, partner can bid 2 diamonds as I have no preference, and then you can fall into what your better major is. They don't have to just take a call right away. They can actually punch it back to you, and then you bid your better suit. 2 diamonds is 1 major. Generally a 6-card suit, maybe sometimes a really good 5, but it's just single suited major, which is multi. So that's where you get multi-landy from. We just shown them with 2 clubs and 2 diamonds. 2 hearts and 2 spades are your Capoletti, like 2 hearts and 2 spades, where 2 hearts is hearts in a minor and 2 spades is spades in a minor. And you might be saying, well, how did I clearly show what my shape is here? Can't I still be 5-4 or 4-5? No, because what people play double as, typically in multi-landy, is that you play double as basically 5+ of a minor with a 4-card major. So you have 2 hearts and 2 spades to clearly show which one's longer, and you have double to show the other possibility. So you basically covered all your different 2 suited types of bids, more or less, which makes this very useful. And so in terms of follow-ups, I think 2 clubs, I said 2 diamonds is no preference, punting it back. After double, 2 clubs is bid your major, 2 diamonds is bid your minor, and then everything else is natural. So you have, 2 clubs is bid your password correct for your minor, 2 diamonds is bid your major. I got that backwards. I'm glad I wanted to correct that before that went live because that would have sounded really dumb otherwise. Now, some people do play different defenses against strong and weak no trumps. I think obviously you want to be able to have a penalty double in your toolbox versus weak no trumps, because if not, you're at a big loss. So what you might play in these situations, if you're going to play multi-landy this way, is you might say this is against strong, and you might basically reprise this entire thing against weak no trumps with the exception of the double. And with the double, you play that as penalty. And of course, you and your partner need to have a definition of what a strong no trump looks like. I think if 15 is included in the range, it should be strong. So 14 to 16, I don't think I've seen too many 13 to 15s there, but 12 to 14 I think would be weak. And then basically weak is just everything else under that. And then with that you throw in that double and that becomes penalty. The other option, and it's funny because I thought this was crazy the first time I started playing it, and then I realized that it's actually pretty good, is playing double as penalty no matter what. So even against strong no trumps, and you might be thinking, well, if you're opening a strong no trump and my partner's making a penalty double, well, there's barely any points left in the deck. Well, for starters, you could have most of those points, in which case you're probably just in big trouble, or you have the ability to pull. But I think a principle that comes along with this is, people are opening, these 15 to 17 no trumps. They're upgrading 14 counts all the time. And when you upgrade 14 counts, it doesn't seem like a lot, but it puts one extra point out there, and that can make that can make a lot of judgment calls a lot easier for you and your partner. And so the ability to be able to penalize them when they're going to do that, which seems to be a more recurring theme, I think does become useful. So I thought about it that way, and I realized that it's not so crazy if you play it that way. Obviously, you can't double as much, and so you don't have the ability to show the 5 minor 4 major hand, so that is a loss. If you want to be able to bid more 2-suited hands because you think that's higher frequency, I totally understand that. But I would also say this, in the times that I've been playing penalty doubles with my partners over strong no trumps, when it actually has come up, it's led to a good board every single time. In nationals, we have cleaned up when that's come into case. We get the 500s and 800s of the world in situations where other people can't because they don't have that on their card. I think after that I was almost sold. So again, you're trading in for a lower frequency bid, but if you want that higher outcome, that's not a crazy thing to play. So I'm just tossing that out there. But if you want to play multi-landy in the traditional sense with playing penalty doubles against weak no trumps, because of course you should against that, then I would understand that. But all right, I think that wraps up this week's episode. So just to recap what we went through, we talked about the different types of doubles. So negative, responsive, maximal when it comes up in terms of opening and bidding suits, support, snapdragon, overcalls and handling your different types of raises there, transfers, which I think is just as powerful over to majors, and with the transfers over overcalls, you have one extra raise to be able to show when you transfer into the Q-bid suit. We talked about no trump overcalls and the balancing no trumps with the implementation of ranged stamen. Then we went through defense against no trump. And again, I'll put this one in here just because I think it's the more common one. But if you want to make this a straight up penalty double even against strong no trumps, more power to you. I will say it does work when it's been wielded. So just keep that in mind. All right, well, thank you guys. In terms of next week's episode, we'll probably go through just talking about the preempts and overcalls. Again, I don't have the style everybody else does because I've always bid a little more passively than others. But we'll probably go through this part. I don't know, do we even go through slam bidding in the next one as well? Maybe that should be its own video, but we're moving quickly, which is good because I wanted to get this series completed before San Francisco. So if we do 3 more episodes, we're just on time. But thank you guys, and I'll see everybody